Parks Department. I am the Parks and Trails Planner. We have a number of members of the Bennett's Village group here who will shortly make a presentation about their proposal. The goal tonight and earlier today and yesterday is to ensure that members of the public, the community, both city and county, or wherever you live, who are park users, have the opportunity to provide the city and Bennett's Village with feedback related to this proposal. So what we're going to do is hand it over to Bennett's Village in just a minute, and they will make a presentation. We can take comments in the chat box during the presentation. After the presentation, we will open it to verbal and phone type comments and questions, which we can answer. All of this feedback will be recorded and copied into a document that will be forwarded to city manager and council so that they can see the public input that's gone into this proposal. At that time, we can decide to give Bennett's Village the green light to go ahead with more fundraising and get into the more details of construction documents, design, and things like that. So with that, I will turn it over to, I think, Kara and Julie with Bennett's Village, who will start a presentation. And I'll be back online shortly to take questions and comments.
Okay, let me open up the presentation. My screen sharing is disabled. Wondering if I need communications to enable that for me?
Yes, I just appointed you co-host.
Okay. Let me see here. And screen 2. Can everyone see the opening slide?
Yep.
That did it.
All right, there we go.
Thanks, Julie. So welcome, folks, tonight. We really appreciate you taking time during the dinner hour to come hear us talk about our proposal. So Bennett's Village has been working with the city of Charlottesville for the last 4 years on planning a space in our community where folks of all ages and all abilities can play side by side in an inclusive and safe play space. My name is Kara McClurkin, and I am the president and co-founder of Bennett's Village. And we are a nonprofit organization whose primary immediate goals is towards working on building Central Virginia's first truly accessible and inclusive playground. In addition to that, we are also very interested in talking and working with the community about seeing ways that we can make our community a more inclusive place to play. And so we do that in a variety of ways, which I can talk about later. But the point of today's meeting is to talk about these plans for expanding the playground space at Penn Park to truly meet the needs of all of our community. So about 1 in 5 members of our community have a disability, and often those disabilities are not compatible with the way that historically playgrounds have been designed and constructed and implemented in our community settings. And that not only affects the individuals with the disability, but it also impacts their family and friends and limits really equitable access to play spaces. And during COVID, I think we really got a sense of how important our play spaces were. As I said, we've been working with the city for about 4 years now, trying to figure out what some solutions could be. And in April of 2019, we went before City Council with an initial proposal of looking at the current playground at Penn Park and thinking about ways we could expand it to truly make it an accessible playground. So our goal is really to create a space where all members of our community of all ages and abilities can come together for play. Next slide, Julie. So before we talk about our plans for this space, I always like to talk a little bit about Bennett, for which Bennett's Village is named. So Bennett's Village is named after my son, Bennett, who was born with spinal muscular atrophy. In spite of the terminal diagnosis we received when he was about a year old, he thrived in our community. He thrived at school, he thrived at church, he thrived in his social community groups. He was curious and social and loved to play, but his muscles didn't work like the rest of our muscles worked. And so the way that he got around was through his power wheelchair. If you think about playgrounds in our community right now, or play spaces in general, many of them are not designed for folks in wheelchairs. When Bennett was playing with his friends, his disability, it didn't disappear, but he was able to integrate and be able to enjoy everything that all of the other kids played. But most of the play spaces didn't allow that to happen without a lot of intervention. We spent a lot of time actually having to pick him up and take him through play spaces. And when I talk with little kids about our project and I say, do you want your mom and dad following you around all over the playground? And the kids always answer, no. It's so important for both children and adults, folks of all ages, developmentally, socially, to have the ability to play independently and with their peers. And so that's one of the real goals of what we're trying to do in creating this space. For Bennett, mulch and sand and mud often served as barriers to play. There are other parts about the way current playground structures are traditionally designed that interfere with folks with other disabilities. For some, it's the fact that they aren't enclosed. There's an issue of elopement, which Julie, I think, we'll talk about later. For others, sometimes the play spaces can seem too stimulating and too overwhelming, and they need some quiet places. There's not a whole lot of places in our community that offer a whole wide range of those kinds of opportunities in one play space. For us to find play structures that didn't have steps and ladders and rocks, or I guess they're fake rocks, plastic rocks, in order to access, we used to drive over an hour to Richmond, where Bennett and his sister could play independently, and I could drink my tea, which if you spent any time with me, you know I always have with me. Until we went to Richmond, I never had a moment to sit back and enjoy my children playing because I always had to be there to facilitate. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a space that changes that dynamic, right? So what is it that we're trying to do? What's our vision for this space? We've talked with kids and parents and doctors and educators and occupational therapists and physical therapists and speech therapists and older adults and those who work with low vision, no vision members of our community, those who are hard of hearing, those who work with the older members of our community. We've talked with them all and we've asked them, what would an inclusive space, an inclusive, safe, fun space look like? And out of that, we've created some designs. So one of the things that we're looking at is we're trying to find an independent exploration. As I said, Bennett didn't always want an adult carrying him from place to place. He wanted to go where he wanted to go, when he wanted to go. He wanted to be able to play next to his peers. He didn't want to go up on the sidewalk and watch his friends playing on the structures. He wanted to go play with them. We're looking at spaces that can provide some stimulation for members of our community who need that, whether it's color or sound or smell. We also want to create some spaces when folks are feeling overwhelmed. I think many of us have, over the course of the pandemic, gone outside, gone to nature to sort of try and find calm, peaceful places. So we want to make sure that we're creating spaces and structures within the park that allows that to happen, that supports those needs. We want to provide play structures and spaces that allow folks of all ages and abilities to play near or with their caregivers, depending upon their personal situation. We want to provide a variety of sensory experiences. We know that's an important component of play as well. So we're thinking, we've got a sensory garden planned that takes into account sounds and smells and visually stimulating things and touch. And I always like to say that we're not encouraging people to eat from this garden, but we also want to make sure that the sensory garden is full of materials that are non-toxic so that we're not causing harm to any members of our community as well. We want to provide spaces that allow for free play, but also that allow for directed play. And I won't talk about it here, but if you are curious, I am happy to spend a lot of time talking about the importance of restrooms and the fact that most models in the public spaces don't actually accommodate the wide range of needs of our community, whether we are talking about gender neutral bathrooms or whether we're talking about family style bathrooms. If you are a female caregiver and you are caring for an adult male who may have some extra toileting needs, where are they supposed to go out and play and then have a place to go to the bathroom. Because they don't have those bathroom spaces, sometimes they don't go out at all. And that's not okay. We can do better as a community. So looking at bathrooms that really support the wide range of needs of our community. And of course, we want the playground space to be inviting and encouraging for all types. So making sure that it is visually stimulating and interesting and supports all different kinds of interests in our community. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Julie to talk about more specifics.
My name is Julie Basic. I am the chair of the board of directors for Bennett's Village, and I'm also a landscape architect by profession, and have in my career planned several playgrounds. So I'm going to talk about the design specifics and our concept plan. So first, for those of you who aren't familiar with Penn Park, we're going to do a little bit of background for location. You can see on this slide that the red star is Penn Park. It's located within the city of Charlottesville, surrounded by Albemarle County. The second square shows the Penn Park location, a little bit telescoped in, and then at Penn Park, you can see the red star. Our project is located in between the parking lot and the tennis courts that currently exist. So it would encompass the open field, the existing playground, and a little bit of the woods down the slope and beyond to the northeast. So this is a wireframe overlay, an outline of the concept plan that we'll talk about a little bit further down the road here tonight, overlaid onto an aerial photograph of the existing conditions at Penn Park. So you can see the boundaries of our proposed playground. In the top half of the picture, you can see the label treehouse. And we will talk more about our phase 1 treehouse project again later in the presentation. But you can see how the spaces lay out in the existing area right now. The bathrooms will stay the same for now, but the rest of the area will change based on how we implement the concept plan over time. So we hired a landscape architecture firm out of Baltimore, Maryland, named Hanreichel. We sorted through 7 different proposals from different landscape architecture firms to find the right fit of people who understood our vision and mission and were good to work with, are familiar with Charlottesville, and Hanreichel did an excellent job. The project manager for this project, her daughter has autism, and she understood a lot of the needs of people with non-traditional abilities and how to design for those needs. So here we have a bubble diagram, which is the basis for any concept design. We took the stakeholder input that we got from talking to physical therapists, from people of all different ages, from all different backgrounds, working in the city of Charlottesville, and the landscape architect took that information and turned it into a site program. And that's a way of spatially planning out different areas of the concept. So you can see each color. Can you all see my cursor moving?
Yes.
Okay. So each color represents a different space in our concept plan, and that space is tied together by a red loop, which will be a walkway or a travel way that ties all the different spaces together. And you can see that we have space for a cableway, which we'll explain in a little bit. There's a resting area / buffer zone to separate some of the more active spaces from the passive spaces. There is a donut swing, which we'll explain with some pictures. It's not made out of donuts. It's actually in the shape of a circle. Here's our treehouse / nature play with a little bit of sensory garden mixed in. Further to the west, we have the sensory garden that Kara was talking about earlier that would stimulate the 5 different senses. Our existing bathroom space right here Moving further along the loop path, there is a hill play area that it's not a level ground. It gives people a different feeling of moving up and down different gradients in the topography. We move on to a hide and seek area, and then to a small splash pad water play area, and around here to a little area for smaller children, toddlers, infants, so that they can be separated from the adults and kids who are moving around and perhaps moving faster, playing harder in the rest of the playground. And we have this arrival pavilion that connects the existing playground with the overall concept. So again, these are just bubble diagrams that help the landscape architects understand how to lay out spaces based on the words that they've heard from stakeholders. And here is how that bubble diagram got turned into a concept plan with actual spaces, actual measurements. We want to reiterate that this is a concept. It is a vision of what could happen out at Penn Park, based again on the stakeholder feedback and that bubble diagram. This is what the landscape architects thought. If we can raise all the money and if everything works out as planned, perhaps the concept, the playground could look like this. So we will, going back to that bubble diagram, if you can remember, there's this walking track or rolling track that connects all the spaces together in a loop. And it's a loop because it's a great way to connect spaces inside of the playground. And it also helps people with memory issues, such as older adults, people with dementia, know that they can walk in a circle and always come back to where they started. It's a way of helping them connect mentally, put the thoughts together in their head, how to move throughout the space and not get confused. Here's our cableway, our donut swing, the nature play area with a proposed bird's nest that is human scale, so someone could get inside and pretend to be a bird, a squirrel. It could be one of those places where people take a rest. If you're feeling overstimulated, you just need a quiet break, you can head into that bird's nest. Here's our tree house, where we think it could go. And if you remember back from that wire diagram, this space right here in the gray is essentially where the existing playground is right now. Here is a willow tunnel that you can move through to access the boardwalk to get onto the treehouse. And we'll spend some more time on the treehouse specifically in a few more slides. Here is the sensory area that has things to touch and feel and smell and perhaps taste if we can work that out in a safe manner. Moving around the existing restrooms again, moving around, we have this hill play area with perhaps a structure that people can climb on, hang from, work on their upper body strength, roll underneath, just be with their peers in an area that's not, level flat. Moving around a little bit further, we have this hide and seek area. And one thing that most people like to do, play hide and seek with their friends, with their peers. And if you are in a wheelchair or if you can't move very fast, it is very difficult to have that game. So one thought is to have something like idea of a half wall or a series of curved structures where someone can play with their friends no matter what their physical ability is, and have that element of surprise and thrill to either hide from your friend or seek your friend. And moving on a little bit further, we have the splash pad area, and it is somewhat of a traditional splash pad, but there's also the plan to put misters in. Some people with disabilities or non-traditional body systems have issues controlling their temperature, especially if it's their body temperature, especially if it's really warm outside. So having an area that has a cool mist is really important, because if someone can't control their body temperature and it's getting too hot for them, they need to go home for the day. So if we have an area where they can cool down, kind of recover a normal temperature, then they can stay and play with their friends and not have to leave. And moving a little bit further down, here's this area for the smaller children, the infants, the toddlers, to have their own space where they're out of the mix. And here's our entrance pavilion, where people come in, they park at the existing parking lot, and they move through the space, again, to our connecting loop track. And some of the finer elements in this concept plan, here's the cableway. It is essentially like a zip line, but it is different in that instead of standing on a platform and holding yourself up by your hands, or standing and holding onto a bar, there will be the option for a seat where if you can't hold yourself up, if your muscles aren't working very well, or if you don't have the strength, you can sit and glide down that cable path and have the movement, have the ability to experience that thrill of movement and speed, which normally people with mobility issues don't have access to that, and especially not in any of the playgrounds in our area. Our donut swing, you'll see some pictures of this in our slides coming up, but it is a round swing. There's one very similar to it at Reeves Park, if you're familiar with that park. The swing is a flat saucer. And again, if you can't control your muscles very well, if you can't sit up on your own, you have the ability to lie back on this swing and move back and forth and experience the movement. There's a proprioception where you can experience your limbs feeling movement. So that donut swing enables that effect. And if we move on to these, they always look to me kind of like the moon, but what they are, we call them hidey holes in Bennett's Village, but the idea is to have some kind of structure. In the concept plan, it's shown as domes with holes in them. So if you're feeling overstimulated, if you're feeling, boy, this place is really crowded, it's noisy, I need a place to go and hide out for a little bit and kind of calm down, you can go inside this dome. The holes are there so someone can see out and a caregiver can see in, but you are also kind of protected from all the bustling activity around you. So you can still be part of the playground. You don't need to leave for the day. You don't need to be separated from your peers. You can just take a break and take a breather. And sometimes I think we all need that regardless of our ability situation. We talked about the bird's nest, the sensory play, the nature play area where we would have things like, logs, either real or concrete rocks to move around, climb on, use your motor skills. Moving a little bit further down again, we're just kind of backtracking to go to the finer points. Here is a merry-go-round that can accommodate wheelchairs. And Kara, do you have anything to add? Did I miss any of the finer points?
Helps if I turn off the mute. One of the things that I always like to note when I'm talking about these spaces is that sometimes people think, oh, you're designing them just for people with this kind of disability or this kind of situation. And that's not true. Like, we've talked about many of these things that will help support those who say have physical mobility issues or who maybe need quiet spaces, calming spaces, but all of us can benefit from those things. The donut swing is not just for folks whose muscles don't work very well. You can sit on that. You can even stand on that, although I don't recommend that. But all of the equipment and all of the play structures that we're designing are not for any one group of people. We're trying to make them as flexible as possible, as interesting and adaptive for a wide range of needs and abilities. I don't know about you, but sometimes on a hot day, the thought of going into one of those hidey holes with a book actually sounds pretty good if I've got another adult who's paying attention to the little ones around me. And so you'll notice that they're different sizes, right? Because we want to accommodate you know, everyone, and we all have different sizes. Also, maybe two friends want to go in there and quietly talk. Maybe, you know, it's not just, I want to escape from the world, but maybe it's like, I want to go and I want to have my secret plans without mom and dad, you know, listening in on our secrets. So that's a, you know, that's a great place for that, as the bird's nest is. So we're just trying to come up with spaces that are flexible and can work for everyone. This isn't a play space for one type of person. It's actually the opposite. And any of these features are going to be enjoyed by everyone.
Yes, that's an excellent point to reinforce that when we were working on this concept plan, it is not only for children, it's for multi-generational. There are a lot of caregivers who are now grandparents and grandparents taking care of grandchildren. There are parents with 2-3 kids who need a place for the children to play safely. There are veterans who are disabled, who have children who are traditionally abled. So when we say a place for all to play, it's all, regardless of who you are, where you come from, and how you plan on moving through the site. Which reminds me that there is one thing I neglected to talk about is that this entire area, we plan on fencing it in, and that will help with some containment issues, whether you have, you're a single parent trying to keep track of your 3 kids, and you can feel comfortable that the fence will somewhat contain them if they're all running in different directions. Or if you have a child with autism who has elopement issues and tends to want to run, the fence will help keep them contained. Or a grandparent with dementia who is a wanderer. So having a fence enclosure serves all sorts of people. Okay. So this is a perspective view that the landscape architects developed to give people a 3D version of the park or the playground, to give a better understanding of how this might look in reality. And here we are with some benchmark slides. We call it either a vision board or a palette board, but some of the images that were collected to give people a better idea of what we're talking about when we mean cableway. So this slide is all about our cableway, and you can see that there are many different ways to achieve something similar to a zipline effect. Different ways of seating people, hard plastic or fabric chairs, but everyone gets a chance to have the same experience. And that's what we mean by inclusivity, is that everybody has an equitable ability to play together. This is a multiple vision board with multiple different ideas. There's a ground mister that you can see over here. So that's what we're talking about, cooling bodies down, or it's just really cool. Even if your body temperature doesn't vary to a great degree, misters are just cool to play with and cool to see. Here's this donut swing, and an example of the dome structures for calming play, or meeting up with your friend, or where we're going to find Kara when she's stressed out, reading a book. And here's some example of nature play, some human scale bird's nest ideas. And we had talked about one thing that we really want to do is involve the community and artists, and get people involved in doing murals and sculpture, and maybe creating some birdhouses for the nature area. We're talking to local and regional sculptors, or having a school group design and build and paint some birdhouses that might go in the nature play area, or something to that effect. But we want to make this a community space where the community is reflected in how this gets designed. And that's why we're here tonight, is to make sure that everyone understands that this is a community project, get your input and your feedback. And as we go forward, figuring out ways that we can make this unique to Charlottesville and Albemarle County and the region in general. So back to our tree house that we've been talking about. So our tree house is our phase 1 project. The entire concept is about 3 acres, but the phase 1 project that we want to start with and build from the very beginning is an elevated tree house. Here's this willow tunnel again. And if you go up in the upper left-hand corner, you can see this red line is where this section is taken from. So this is as if you were standing on the slope looking toward the tree house. So this again is just an idea of what a treehouse could look like at Bennett's Village. You enter through the willow tunnel, come across a boardwalk that is level, so anybody, no one has to take steps, or it's not difficult to reach the treehouse. And the treehouse is set on posts over the slope, and there's also a space underneath for people to play with. There will be a switchback trail that is accessible to reach the bottom of the slope. And the goal is to have treetop experience and nature available to anyone who wants it, because that is often a difficult thing for people with mobility issues to make it on a dirt trail or a steep trail, or have the experience of being among the trees, listening to the birds. So we wanted to make sure that this experience was possible. So Kara, did you want to add anything about the treehouse?
I don't think so. Just that the goal is to sort of be immersed with the trees around the folks who are playing in that space, and to note that it's not actually going to be connected to a tree. Sometimes when people think treehouse, they think, oh, you're going to build it in a tree. But the trees in that area are not conducive to that. And we want to protect as many of the trees as we can so that people have a view. And we want to create something that can hold the weight of wheelchairs and lots of people running around. So I always want to manage expectations. People are like, well, what tree are you going to pick? And the answer is none of them. That this is a surface to be surrounded by the trees, not actually wrapped around a tree. One thing I haven't said that I always think is important to say is when we're designing this space, we're thinking about also what are the needs of our community. And so something that's different than other play spaces you may have been is that we're going to be looking at running electrical throughout the space so that people can plug things in. I think you saw earlier a picture of Bennett in his power wheelchair. If you've ever tried to lift one of those when the battery has died, it's like 350, 400 pounds. That is not something I can do by myself. And so particularly for those with disabilities, but also for all of us, we very much rely on cell phones and for calling the doctors and trying to manage all the chaos of life around us. And so trying to make sure that we add those kinds of features to help support people's safety and daily needs is part of what we try to do when we're thinking about this space.
Mm-hmm. So now we come to the extra fun stuff, budget and costs. Our overall fundraising goal is $5 million. And a lot of people have asked us, why does it take so much money to build a playground? And we could just raise $100,000 and buy an off-the-shelf piece of equipment. But this is not our vision. All the things that we showed you in the concept plan and in those pictures, well, a lot of it is custom made. And it's custom made because the traditional playground equipment that is available is often not as accessible as marketed. A lot of things say that they are accessible. They have something called a transfer station, but it's actually a step up from the ground where a parent can take their child out of a chair, put them on the piece of play equipment, and then it's up to the child to move themselves through. But here we want to make sure that as much as possible, everyone has the ability to play independently, to move independently to the site. And to do that, we need some custom pieces of equipment. The bird's nest would be custom, the tree house needs to be custom built and fit to the site specifically. The hide and seek areas, there's a lot of things that if they're not specifically custom will need to be adapted to this site. So one of the major expenses is the surfacing. A lot of playgrounds that you've seen probably have something called engineered wood fiber, which is that mulch, the wood mulch chips in there. The mulch chips aren't very accessible to someone in a chair or in a walker or someone wearing heels or trying to push a stroller through the site. So our goal is to put a material called poured in place rubber surface. It's similar to what is out at Forest Hills Park if you've been there off of Cherry Avenue. It's the smooth surface that has little rubber granules that are held together by a resin binder. And that surface is easy to roll on, it's easy to walk on. It is a little more functional than your traditional mulch surface. And that is a big chunk of the cost. But it is a necessity to make sure that everyone can use this playground. So in order to address the $5 million price tag, we are going to break this into phases. And as we noted, our very first phase is the tree house. If we tried to build this all at once, which would be great if anyone has a donor out there, it would take $5 million. That's our estimate at this point. Thus the phases, so we can manage this, we can get something in the ground for people to use sooner rather than later. So Bennett's Village will provide all the funding and manage the construction for this project. And we are giving a completed playground as a gift to the city of Charlottesville. They will then take it from there. They will become the owners, the city will become the owners and manage the operations and maintenance in perpetuity. Our fundraising strategy, how are we going to get to this point? We are looking everywhere. We are searching for grants. We got a lovely $25,000 grant from the Virginia Outdoors Fund to pay for the design of the treehouse. We're looking for sponsorships, people who want to put their names on any piece of equipment, direct donations from donors, fundraising events that you probably attended or heard of. Torchy's Tacos had a fundraising event for us. We've done fundraising events at Random Row, Penn Park. We've been out there in the community. And hopefully you've either participated or heard about us on the news. Partnerships where we can either trade services or have in-kind work done for us. And we also plan on asking the city of Charlottesville and Albemarle County for some capital improvements plan money if we can get on their budgets at some point. Because this is not just a city project. It is located in the city, but really people from all the surrounding counties use Penn Park. It is a regional park system and it draws people from all over. So that is the way that we hope that we will raise enough money to eventually build all pieces in all stages of the playground.
We're also seeking state funding.
State funding, that's right. We had talked with Sally Hudson to figure out how we can get on the state's budget and get some funding from the state of Virginia, the Commonwealth of Virginia. And this was based on an idea. It has happened out in Seattle. There's a very similar playground being built now where the state of Washington gave a chunk of money to help build that playground in Seattle. So what we need to raise at some point a total of $5 million. Our current Phase 1 Treehouse project, the estimated conservative budget is $500,000, which will pay for the design plans, the plan approvals, the permitting, and the construction costs. We are aiming high for this, and we think $500,000 would cover all of the costs and things that we just aren't even gonna think about that come up at some point. We need community input. This is what we're here for tonight, to hear your comments, your suggestions. We need your support, your interest, and volunteers. We have some open board positions. If you're interested in serving our board of directors, we always need event volunteers. We're looking for an event volunteer coordinator. If you have any interest in working with us, please feel free. We will put in the chat our web address, thank you, Kara, and our email address. Feel free to reach out. And we also need support and advocacy from the City of Charlottesville staff and volunteers. We've talked with the Parks and Rec Advisory Commission. We're setting up meetings with the city manager and city council to make sure that they are all on board and understand what our vision is and how we can work together to make that happen. And our next steps before we open up to comments and questions are design and fundraise for the treehouse. We're going to continue fundraising even after the treehouse is built out, continue our community outreach and education through UVA, through local school systems, and continue our discussions with city staff and city council. So at this point,
I was going to say, this is where I also jump in and say, I don't know why I'm so echoey. Jump in and say that if you have an organization, belong to an organization or a group or a school or a scout troop or any sort of thing, thinks that they would be interested in working with us or hearing more about inclusive play or why equity in play is important, please do reach out. Yes, tonight we're talking about these plans specifically, but that's a really important part of our programming is changing the way or having discussions, facilitating discussions about inclusive play in our community. So reaching out to that email address is a great way to find out more about how we can connect you with resources.
We will have this a PDF of this presentation up on our website at some point in the near future.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Julie and Kara. This is Chris Gansick again with City Parks. And we will now open it up if you have chat comments or verbal comments or phone-in comments. And I think Lasheen can help make sure people get through the system on that. Please raise your hand or do what you need to do on Zoom and let us know what you might have for those things. I will be recording the comments into a text file. And if we can answer your questions tonight, we will. If not, we will get back to you as soon as we can as needed. So the microphone is open for public input, questions, comments.
Yeah, so if you do want to make a comment, you can hit the raise hand icon and I can bring you in. I did enable the chat, so you could also type your question or comment into the chat if you're not comfortable speaking. And we will await your comment. So the raise hand icon is on your Zoom screen. You shouldn't have that many controls, but it's there if you would like to make a comment.
And we're happy to hear, we're happy for questions, comments, concerns.
How many attendees do we have right now?
We have 4.
A smaller group than we had this afternoon, but that's okay.
Maybe we knocked it out of the park.
The email and phone for the Parks Department is obviously open for the next couple weeks if you have follow-up comments that you don't make tonight. So.
Looks like we've got one question or comment.
All right, so I'm going to bring in Margaret.
Hey,
Margaret,
can you guys hear me?
We can.
Awesome. Hey, Kara, this is Margaret Lambert, my guest. How are you?
Hi, I'm well.
Good. It's so awesome to hear these plans. It's really, really incredible to see the pictures and hear you guys describe this. Yeah, I think it would be such a huge benefit and asset to Charlottesville. Just one side note. So I am a foster parent now with People Places, and they do parent support groups out at Penn Park in the shelters. And I'm just thinking it would be such a neat thing for People Places and other community organizations to have this when they go and meet, or when kids are doing sports events, their siblings can wander over there. It feels like the right space in my mind for Charlottesville. And I know you guys have put a lot of thought into that. And it seems like the impact on that land there is not going to be huge. So I know you guys have thought a lot about that. Yeah. And just, as someone who was so honored to meet Bennett in real life, I know he would absolutely love this. So I'm really hoping we can make it happen. keep doing the fundraisers. I really like the one through email with all of the exercises that people could do. That was super creative.
We are working on our May Movement Challenge as we speak. So I hope to be able to announce that in the next couple of weeks. So I'm glad I'm glad you liked it.
Yeah, awesome. We'll keep it up. It's so great. And I hope the city realizes how unique this is and how much it will actually bring to our community.
It looks
Thank
like
you. We also got a chat from Jennifer. Do we have any other hands up at the moment?
Not right now.
Okay. If we don't, I would say great presentation again, ladies, and thank you to those who attended. My email is gensic, GENSIC, @charlottesville.gov for any follow-up comments. I have another Zoom meeting at 7 about the Rivanna River. So if we don't have any future
Zoom.
comments, and I see Margaret also put another in the chat. I'll make sure that makes it to the record. I believe we are good for tonight. Any last comments from our participants? And with that, we can close the meeting out.
No, again, thank you all for coming, including the city staff, taking your evenings to spend with us. So we appreciate your time, everyone.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all. And again, all of these comments will be put into a file that gets forwarded to City Manager, Parks and Rec Board, and others who will help us ensure that we can continue forward with this project going into the future and get Bennett's Village what they need for their fundraising and design work to really get going.
Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lasheen and David.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a great night.